From a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominick. On today's episode, how to stay serene during your next grocery visit after eyeing a sale on those delectable peanut butter-filled pretzels. And now, the podcast host who's got an eye for bargains that makes everyone say, set it and forget it, Pete Dominick!
Yeah! Thank you very much, Pete Co. I have no idea what you're talking about, and I really don't like those pretzel peanut butter things, but to each their own. And I appreciate you, that's for damn sure. I appreciate all of you because you pressed play, because you listen to this podcast after, I don't know how many years we've been all together doing this. Welcome to all new people, all new listeners. Always want to have you join us at our happy hour hangouts. If you are a paid subscriber, you can do that tonight because this is the Thursday show. And Thursday nights, we host a party, a hangout of sorts, 8 p.m. Thursday, 8 p.m. East. I hope to see you there tonight. New folks are welcome. We always have an awesome time. It's the best part of the week, so sign up now. StandUpWithPete.com, patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Oh, you are going to love my conversation with Dr. Christina Greer today. She's simply one of the smartest people I know. I always love talking to her. I love her. She is so great, and today's conversation is no exception. We cover a lot. I'm very happy that she was able to join me today. But let's talk about yesterday, shall we? Got a couple things to play for you I think you'll love. But yesterday was day 848 of the Biden presidency. How about it? We've got the aftermath of the elections. It seems that progressives are on the march, have the momentum in many places across the country. In Colorado, Republicans lost in a conservative stronghold in Colorado Springs they've held for 45 years. Democrats beat a DeSantis-endorsed candidate in Florida's biggest city, and a lot of people are attributing it to Republicans want to remake America into Gilead, into a patriarchal Christian nationalist state where women have no reproductive rights and babies can buy guns. That's my analysis. You know, I don't have a PhD in political science or anything, but I think that might have a little something to do with it. Yesterday, President Biden said that he's confident the U.S. will avert a default as negotiations over raising the debt limit are continuing. The North Carolina legislature banned most abortions after 12 weeks. The National Archives is going to turn over 16 records to special counsel Jack Smith that show President Trump, former disgraced, lecherous, rapey Donald Trump, says his advisors knew that the correct declassification process while he was president, so that is not going to be good for him. About 39% of American households now say they struggle to make ends meet. Between 2019 and 2020, the overall mortality rate for young Americans rose by 10.7%. Yikes. Wow. And the World Meteorological Organization warned there is a 66% chance that the annual average global temperatures will exceed the Paris Climate Agreement threshold. And here's one more headline that wraps it all up. Depression rates for U.S. adults are at record levels. Depression rates in the United States are skyrocketing, particularly among young adults and women. A new poll shows 29% of U.S. adults report being diagnosed with depression at some point during their lifetimes, an increase from 19.6% in 2015. That probably has something to do with connected to the mortality rate going up as well. If you are struggling, I want you to know that you are not alone. I've tried to be as transparent as I can about the things that I struggle with. I have never been diagnosed with depression, but that doesn't mean that I or you aren't struggling at times. So do your best to be transparent about it. Know that you are not alone. Try to find help, create a practice, and hey, join us for the Thursday night hangouts. That's the best I can tell you right now because they always cheer me up. If you're not a subscriber, sign up now and hang out with us because I get rejuvenated every Thursday night when I see you, when I feel that I'm not alone, when I know that I've got your support and you've got mine as much as we can. That is a tough statistic to hear, to read, to think about, but we'll keep talking about it. I'll get experts on to continue talking about it, and we'll find ways around it, through it, over it, under it, whatever it is. Now, here's something that I think is really entertaining, folks, that I want to play for you, because Bruce Bartlett is an old friend of mine, of the show, and the last time I invited him on over a year ago, he said, "Why would you want to talk to me? I just don't think I have anything to say anymore." That's my Bruce Bartlett impression. Well, I'm going to have to bother him again, because he is out there yesterday testifying at the Senate Budget Committee, which held a hearing to highlight the role that tax cuts have played in increasing the national debt, which is really great. The hearing is titled "The Rich Get Richer, Deficits Get Bigger, How Tax Cuts for the Wealthy and Corporations Drive the National Debt." Included testimony from a number of experts who argued that Republican-led tax cuts are the prime culprit in the nation's fiscal condition. And I've got some audio from that I think is so good. Bartlett himself actually sent it to me. He said, "Here's some audio you might want to use." And use it, I will, Bruce, and I'll reach out to him and try to get him back on. But this is this idiot Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, who apparently has a fake accent and a fake folksy attitude. And what he decided to do was to discredit. He thought he was discrediting Bruce Bartlett by reading some of his tweets. And this is amazing to me, because to some extent, I'm directly connected to this, because I literally created Bruce Bartlett's Twitter account. I created an account for him. I gave him the password. I said, "You got to start tweeting." So his tweets, I'm responsible for them. I take credit for this exchange from John Kennedy with Bruce Bartlett, which is so amazing, and then followed up by Democratic Senator Tim Kaine in a brilliant way. But listen to this, and you tell me who sounds more discredited in this exchange.
Mr. Bartlett, let me ask you a couple of questions, if I could. I believe you're here on behalf of our Democratic colleagues.
I was invited by them, yes.
Okay. On May 5th, 2023, I want to read your tweet. "How soon before Clarence Thomas's corruption goes the way of Melania's green card? A few days of intense speculation, then totally forgotten." Did I read that right?
No, I wrote that.
Let me ask you about another one, if I could.
Okay, let's see. Got a few other tweets of Bartlett's to read.
On April 22nd, 2023, you tweeted, quote, "Apparently French people are too stupid to know the difference between champagne and beer. Must be protected." Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, that was a joke. I was referring to the fact that they were banning,
right,
as I recall, Miller beer because it was called the champagne of beer, which I thought was kind of silly.
Right. On April 8th, 2023, you tweeted, quote, "Tennessee is a cesspool of racism and corruption," end quote. Did I read that right?
Well, yes, maybe an exaggeration, but I think things are pretty terrible in that state, frankly.
Okay. On May 10th, 2023, you tweeted, "Excellent news. Congratulations to every person who left the Southern Baptist Church, which was formed to defend slavery." Did I read that correct?
Yes, and I provided a link to an official document of the church, which takes responsibility for its racist history. As you know, the church was created during the Civil War. It broke away from the Northern Church because it supported slavery.
Oh.
On April 5th, 2023, you tweeted, quote, "Fox reporters don't deserve the common courtesy usually extended to journalists. They should be treated like people who do podcasts
Hey.
or write newsletters unfettered by fact-checking or balance. Revoke Fox press credentials. Don't call on them at press conferences. Ignore them.
Yes.
Yes, I said
Do you
that.
really believe that that government should use its power to thwart a cable news station?
I'm not suggesting using governmental power in any way whatsoever.
Sure you are. You say revoke their press credentials. Don't call on them at press conferences and ignore them.
Okay, well, yeah, I agree with that. I think I think Fox is not a serious news organization. I wrote a long paper on the subject that I'd be happy to provide to you.
Would you like that added to the record, Senator Kennedy, or should we just leave it as it is?
Well, I don't know that I'm going to have time to read the gentleman's papers. I think I already know what's in them. On May 13th, 2023, did you, I'm going to read one of your other tweets, quote, "Very good news. The AM radio band is a cesspool of right-wing talk and insipid sports babble. The bandwidth has better value." Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I said that, and I believe that.
Yes.
On May 12, 2023, I believe you tweeted the following, quote, "Ralph Nader correctly points out that Democrats have done a poor job of fighting Republican fascism and stupidity." Did I read that right?
Yes.
Can't even pronounce fascism.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bartley, I
Thank you, Senator.
I appreciate you answering my questions. It helps me to determine the credence or credibility to give to your testimony.
Well, I wouldn't take anything that's said on Twitter too seriously, thank you.
Well, you're welcome, ladies and gentlemen, for creating Bruce Bartlett's Twitter account and that moment. I'll definitely invite him back on and see what he says. Well, moments later, it gets better because Tim Kaine somehow analyzes in real time, like a senator or two later, I think, the events that were the catalyst for several of those tweets. And it's almost as if Tim Kaine and Bruce Bartlett knew this was going to happen and were working together hand in hand. They danced here where, well, here it is.
Mr. Bartlett, you're a private citizen, right? And like a lot of private citizens, you do social media without the staffs that we have that exercise some control over what we say, correct?
Yes, well, Senator, anybody who's read my...
Well, here, let me, I'm going to try to do quick questions because I want to let Mike... so you don't have anybody checking what you say, which is what virtually everybody in America does. I had not heard the tweets, and I was kind of trying to follow them, but just the tweet about Tennessee, was that something you tweeted after the Tennessee legislature took the unprecedented step of expelling 2 African-American members of the legislature for advocating passionately for gun safety laws in the aftermath of a tragic shooting at a Christian private school in Nashville? Was that what motivated your tweet?
Yes, Senator. I thought that was one of the most irresponsible actions I've seen in American politics during my life.
I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I can't imagine the Virginia legislature doing that or any other legislature. And then there was a tweet about Justice Thomas, and from the timing of that, was that a tweet that you did following the news that Justice Thomas had not disclosed that an individual had lavished luxury vacations on him, had purchased his mother's home, had allowed his mother to live rent-free in that home, had renovated that home and surrounding homes, and had granted other benefits to Justice Thomas, also revelations about secret payments to Justice Thomas's wife with instructions that they not be listed. Was the tweet that you acknowledged was somewhat intemperate, was that tweet generated by the revelations of all these shocking stories that Justice Thomas refused to disclose on his financial filings?
Yes, Senator.
And then the third one that I got was there was a tweet that you made about Fox journalists And again, from the date that Justice Kennedy read it, just putting it together in my mind, it suggests that that might have been motivated by Fox News having to settle an historic lawsuit and pay an unprecedented verdict for knowingly and recklessly preaching lies about the election of 2020, and in doing so, damaging without any factual basis a company that tries very hard to produce election equipment that is protected and that's secure. And so was your Fox tweet generated by the revelations that were coming out in that lawsuit?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, there you go. I thought that was fantastic, so I wanted to share that with you. And that's all the audio clips I've got for you, and all the news as well. I want to get to my guest on today's show, and hopefully we'll get Bartlett on soon. But right now, I've got an awesome conversation with the always brilliant Dr. Professor Christina Greer of Fordham University, where she's an associate professor of political science. She's also the co-host of At FAQ NYC, which is a podcast about the city of New York. She also hosts the Blackest Questions on the Grio podcast network. She writes a column for the Amsterdam News. I mean, she does a lot of things. I could be here for a long time reading her bio. Follow her on Twitter at Dr_CM Greer. It's time to talk to my friend, to me, Chrissy Greer. It's always a great time, a great day when we get to connect with Chrissy. So let's do it right now, shall we?
There she is, Professor Dr. Christina Greer. How was this semester? Is it over?
It's almost over. I put my grades in. We've got graduation on Saturday. I'm giving the invocation.
Ooh. For, some people don't know I obviously know what that word means and what it references. Some people don't know. What is an invocation? What is it?
It's like the call to prayer. I can't even pronounce kind it. Of like, I teach at a Jesuit institution at Fordham. So usually people say a prayer. Sometimes people read a poem, or some sort of invitation to sort of let the ceremonies begin. I'll be there with my light blue robe on since I went to Columbia. You wear the robe where you got your PhD. So I'll wear my Columbia robe, and it's great because you can identify all the other people from where they went to school. So like Princeton, I think, has some of the best robes. They look like little tigers running around.
Oh, I didn't know
Columbia,
that.
I think, has the best robe too, because ours is powder blue with these like two crowns, right, kind of on your chest area. Some of them, are kind of similar colors. Like Fordham's the sort of same maroon as Harvard. Berkeley has like a nice color blue. And then your hood that you wear sort of dictates the degree that you have. So like medicine, I think, is green. Lawyers are purple. Ours are blue, like a navy blue. They're different types of colors that you wear based on your PhD. So I think I'm going to read a passage of Warrior of the Light from Paulo Coelho, just to sort of welcome students to think about patience and meditation and failure and success. I'm really still thinking about Giannis from the Bucks when they were
the
eliminated
basketball
from the playoffs. Yeah, when they were eliminated from the playoffs. Do you watch basketball?
Not really. I mean, I used to, but loosely, I know.
I'm like waiting to get my quarter season Knicks tickets. Like that's.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I enjoy it. But he had this really thoughtful reflection because they were like, "Oh, you failed," because they were out in the first round, and he was like asking the journalists to think about failure. Like, we don't always get to win. And just because we came up short, does that necessarily mean it's a failure? So I'm going to choose a passage to help them think about something like that.
I see it now. Okay. Giannis's definition of failure.
Yeah, it's really thoughtful.
I had no idea. I guess his speech went viral. Okay.
Yeah.
So what
because it's right after they got eliminated. It was very genuine and from the heart. And people are like, it's so raw. Like, well, I mean, he just got eliminated like 5 minutes ago. So he's processing his thoughts in real time about, you came up short this season. You did really well to get to the playoffs, but you came up short. And that's what happens when there's some sort of thing where only one person can win. That doesn't mean that you failed just because you didn't get the golden prize. It's sometimes, in many ways with life, it's the journey, not even the destination. So what did you learn from this process of the wins and then the losses? And sometimes that lesson's more important than just the winning.
You're so smart and thoughtful. I wish you would give my invocation. I don't know what that means.
It's just like an invitation. It's like a prayer usually.
No, but I don't know what it means for you to give mine. I'm not graduating
I don't know.
from
Think
anything.
about it. I think maybe we should just have an invocation for the show at the beginning of the show.
Okay. Well, that'll be fun to do.
Opening prayer for the podcast.
What did you teach your students? Give me anything that you worked on this past semester.
This semester, we always spend a lot of time on current events. I'm teaching them how to read the newspaper so they can understand, what they're reading in the text and link it to real life. I mean, we're looking at the courts and it's like, oh my gosh, Clarence Thomas, like what? So it's like, right. If the framers say that the courts are, this is when they're exam questions, like that the courts are the least dangerous branch, do you agree? Like, there's no right or wrong answer, but walk me through your thought process. And a lot of them are like, it's actually not the least dangerous branch. Look at how they're running rampant. Look at how there are no guardrails for Clarence Thomas or, Brett Kavanaugh and how they got in and separation of powers. And, we've got the Electoral College. So the president who can confirm the justices isn't even elected specifically and directly by the people. So, I mean, I'm having them think about the system that they're in. So like one student this semester was like, politics just doesn't work. And I said, well, let's be clear. Did you take the subway to school? Yes. Did you brush your teeth and turn on the faucet and clean water came out? Yes. Like, did you go on roads that, you were able to walk on? Yes. Were you able to breathe air that wasn't filled with smog and poison? Yes. So like, that's government working. So 5% doesn't work, but a lot of it really does work in a lot of different levels.
I don't know if the student said politics doesn't work or government doesn't work, but there's politics in everything. There's politics in everywhere you go, your family, your job, everything has politics.
Politics and how, like, I always tell them, like, a piece of paper is political.
Sure.
And I'm like, walk me through, the forest that was chopped down and the indigenous communities that were pushed out, and the trucks that came through poor communities and gave those kids asthma to deliver us this piece of paper, right? Or the people, my grandfather worked in a paper mill, my mom's dad, for 40 something years. And so, it's dangerous work. All the Black people worked outside, all the white people worked inside. So there's a historical racial component, as is everything in this country. So just thinking about every single piece of your life that is political and also has had some sort of government intervention and regulation as well. So they're good. I really like the Gen Zers. I was on Danielle Moody Mills' podcast, our good friend.
Yeah, love her.
And I love her. And we always have great, thoughtful conversations. And I said something about how much I love Gen Zers and how millennials are, just, they're more entitled than Gen Zers. That's just, I don't think any professor would disagree with me. And some millennial wrote me this long thing on Instagram that was like the most millennial thing that I've ever read in my entire life. It's like, how dare you? I'm upset. Can't believe you're a professor because you insulted me.
Oh, that's funny and interesting and also a little bit tragic. But
this is telling.
I do a series.
I was going to post it, but then I was like, forget it.
I need. I've been doing this regular segment on the show, regular-ish. I've done it twice, where I interview a young person because I have no idea what's going on. So I call it, Gen Z, whatever. And I'll have to get a referral from you. I've talked to a few women, but I'd like to talk to a young guy to see his thoughts on things. Because I agree with you. I think that, my daughters are 18 and 15, so they're in that world. Yeah, it's interesting to watch. But I think that anybody who's a teacher or professor like yourself, and you're exposed to whole classrooms for long periods of time, you have a much better ability to judge. So I'm always interested to hear what your thoughts are.
And we've talked about this before too. It's like, listen, they're super resilient. All of us are, right? To be fair, but these are kids who didn't have normal high school. They didn't have, like the experiences that we had. They've had to go through a lot, and we've just kind of moved on as a society to pretend that like a million citizens didn't just die. We're just like, oh, well, that happened. And so they went through that too. Like they're processing all this death around them. And death is something that, as we get older and we experience with our different friends and family members, like it's a process, a real like digging deep and evaluating oneself. Like young people have had to go through that really early. And I don't think that we've really given them a vocabulary or a grounding to help them navigate that, because we're going through it too. I mean, this is the one thing that like everybody, granted at different levels, right? Some of us have country sheds and nature walks. Other people are working 20 hours a day and worried about rent and food. So we experience it all differently, but it is this collective thing that we went through together. And I definitely see the residual effects. Like there are also just some gaps in their knowledge. Just kind of, I find that I have to slow down my analysis quite a bit. Just they missed a year or two of analytical thinking, by and large.
Yeah, they were glued to their screens like the rest of us. But while their minds were developing, a question about resilience. I feel like I belong to a category of the least resilient people because here's why. I am a white guy. I am straight. I came from a middle upper class family. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, meaning you're talking about like if all those other categories were real, at least this generation did have a collective, adversity of the pandemic, or earlier than that, the last generation, millennials, I guess, had to deal with the financial crisis. We didn't. Straight white guy. And so my point is, I'm now 47 and you and I are pretty close. I think you know how like fragile I am. Like I'm not resilient. Like I didn't establish that resilience, and I'm not using this. I'm saying there's a lot of people in my category that really didn't have, and it's hard. I think I look at other people from any more marginalized community, or even like white straight guys that grew up poor or abused, or they had to establish some kind of resilience. Sometimes I'm like, man, the smallest thing knocks me down like a feather. I am a real weak person. I feel that way sometimes.
I mean, well, shout out to Gen Xers. We're also not shooting up the place the way some of these other kids are. I mean, we didn't have access to it, so we'll see. I mean, that's an interesting causation correlation conversation. If we're both Gen Xers, if we had access to guns the way these people do too. But I don't want to do the oppression Olympics, right? I mean, like, I think all of us, whether you're straight or gay or black or white, like, yeah, there's certain things that I definitely have to go through as a black woman that like white men will never have to experience. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not resilient at all. I just feel like everyone has their own bucket of shit.
Let me flip it. Forget about...
And P.S., I feel like our generation, I'm not over the Challenger. I'm not over the never-ending story and that damn horse dying in the quicksand. Like, I feel like there's some things that are collectively traumatic about Gen X that I'm not over. I feel like we need to get some credit.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the worst of it for me. But here's the more important point. It's not that I'm saying, woe is me, I'm not resilient. That's something I need to work on. It's the point being, I'm from a class of people that has very little empathy. We're the ones often creating paradigms and regulations and laws, and then also saying then that we're more kind of marginalized or discriminated against. It's my people, the people that travel in my lane, that overwhelmingly can't look at a situation and feel some kind of empathy for a whole group of people. That's the more important point. We're in charge now. We're making decisions, and everything went pretty well for us, so we can't see other people's pain. Does that make sense?
Together. It's like also low key, like, by and large, you guys are creating the problems, right? So it's like, and
more
then
importantly,
but I think the word you use, which is really important, is lack of empathy. And I think that's just an inherent United States problem. I think that's a white America problem in a lot of ways. You think about somebody like Ron DeSantis, again, Gen Xer. Like, dude, you are a grandchild of immigrants, yet you have no empathy for immigrants. I mean, I talk about being a trustee of the Tenement Museum a lot because so many people's ancestry is like, we are a nation of immigrants, voluntary and involuntary. But there's like a lack of empathy from so many people to see this new wave of immigrants as any different from their grandparents or their parents or their great-grandparents. They're just coming by foot as opposed to boat. But like, it's literally the same fleeing of countries, the same desire for something better for their children. I mean, all of the ingredients are the same. It's just the people look differently and the sending countries are different. But yeah, I think that there's an empathy problem, but I wouldn't necessarily be like, ugh, what's wrong with me? I would sort of think of it in I'm a little pragmatically optimistic. I would think of it more as like, so then what should I be doing? What could I be doing with this privilege? I think about that a lot. I grew up very privileged in a lot of ways. So it's like, what should I be doing to reach back and uplift other people who just didn't have the opportunities that I've had? I'm not going to erase the fact that like both my parents are college educated. My dad's parents were both college educated. His grandparents are both college educated. I'm not going to apologize for that. So it's like, so then what should I be doing though to help somebody who didn't have, my mom worked for the airlines. I grew up flying around the world. So it's like, that's nothing wrong with me because of that. It's just, what should I be doing to give other people an opportunity to level the playing field so they can then have an experience that's more equitable?
Yeah.
And not poo-poo people who don't sort of have the same upbringing.
Yeah. Use whatever resources you have as a result of the position you're in to make other people's lives better. But I don't have time for that. Sorry.
Right. See, there you go.
So busy with stuff.
It's sort of like, did you ever watch 30 Rock?
No, not really.
And I never really liked the comedy of Tracy Morgan before 30 Rock.
Yeah.
And then I really enjoyed 30 Rock. It doesn't fully hold up, certain jokes and certain scenarios. But there's this one scene where, like, Tracy, you have diabetes, all you have to do is just like change your diet, eat right, drink less. And he's like, well, we tried. It's like 2 seconds later, he's like, you know what? It's over.
Let me ask you about, you mentioned Ron DeSantis. I wanted to ask you about that. My understanding is not only did he cancel, defund, speak out against DEI initiatives and programming, diversity, equity, inclusion programming in K through 12, but now even at the college level, which seems really bizarre. I wonder if you can tell me what the difference between those two educational systems or levels, saying that something's not appropriate to be taught or applied K through 12. To some extent, it's like the parent, all this parental right bullshit. The parents should have say what their kids are learning. College, you're an adult. You chose to go to college. And so there's more agency there. Your parents aren't responsible. Is there any difference when it comes to DEI initiatives being?
No. So here's the deal, Pete. He's just saying the quiet part loud that, so many Republicans have been saying for decades. I mean, let's be clear. The education that we have now is a watered down, whitewashed, white supremacist version. The fact that we're learning about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Frederick Douglass, and Sojourner Truth is like the only 4 Black people that ever existed. And it was like U.S. chattel slavery. Then there was like some weird 100 years. And then the civil rights movement. And then Chrissy's your professor. Ding, ding, ding. Like, that's what we get. So this project has always existed. It's just we have a super watered down version of America. We call it Black history. Black history is American history. If you don't understand what happened to Black people, then you don't understand the history of this country. White people should be enraged that they actually don't understand the history of the United States, that they don't understand our relationships with Native peoples and mass genocides and the long, generations of Mexicans that have been in this country and how we've cut out Texas just to sort of exclude, Mexican and indigenous populations, and the history of New Mexico. Like all these, every state has such a unique racist, racialized history, every single state. So that's already whitewashed. Most people don't even know that. So DeSantis is attacking K through 12. You can kind of hide behind the shield of like the parents and, they're so concerned and you're just teaching my kid to be racist. It's like, well, if I can live it, they can read it. So settle down. With colleges, he's saying, well, your money, your taxpayer money shouldn't go towards this like racist agenda of teaching, racism. And it's like, Ron DeSantis, you just want to cater to the basest levels of your white supremacist base, which is taken over the vast majority of the Republican Party, and attack university systems that are teaching about diversity and inclusion and like what has happened. And also, as we have always talked about, what are some solutions to move forward as a people? We can't fully move forward if we don't have a discussion. And we also know discussions aren't always going to be easy and braiding each other's hair, kumbaya. Sometimes we have to recognize that there is a lot of pain in this country. Like there's mass rapes, there's mass exoduses, there's mass genocides, there's, mass chattel slavery. Like families are separated. And if we understand that history, it makes us more empathetic to what's going at the border when we're separating children. It's like, oh, but we did that already. Like the history of this nation is like, we did that to millions of Native Americans. We did that to millions of Black people. We did that to millions of poor whites who were indentured servants, taking their children away from them for them to never be seen again. So it's like we will start making connections about who we are as a people. And that is the antithesis of what Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party want. Full stop. What I don't think the vast majority of white people who are sitting on the sidelines fully understand is that Florida is a test case. Because once it starts in Florida, then it goes to Texas, and then it goes to Virginia, and then it goes to all these other states that either have Republican governors or, as we've seen in North Carolina, Republican state houses that can override the veto of a governor and make these things happen.
It happened in my kids' school district in Rockland County 2 years ago. And we just won the board election again last night. We beat these people who were a little bit, well, it was only one candidate, but she ran last time. And I mean, it's happening everywhere. It's just as you said, if you don't think it can happen, it's a little bit different. Its gradation's different. It's based on who's going to, be most outspoken and what you can get away with, obviously. But if you don't fight at the Board of Education level, it's so much more important to me than like your congressional representative, because my kids go to this school and you're going to tell them they can't have these books in the library, or they can't learn this, or they can't learn that. They can't have rainbow flags. Like they can't feel okay identifying as who they are. Like if I'm not fighting for that, what am I fighting for?
Right. But if you also don't teach kids the difference between local, state, and national politics, they know Joe Biden's the president.
Right.
There's something in Congress that like seems to be working, not working. They have no idea what that is. And they don't understand the importance of all these local level offices and the importance of state houses. And we always have to remember, the state houses also are launching pads for people to go to Congress and then become national figures. So if we take out even civics, because now it's like, oh, well, that's divisive. And it's like teaching about the history of people fighting to like have inclusive representation. Yes. So anything that basically has people of color or immigrants or even women, right? I mean, that's the crazy part. When we think we can link all of these things together, when we think about these abortion bans, it's like you have men who clearly don't understand how a woman's body works if you're doing a 6-week abortion ban. Because guess what? Your period comes every 4 weeks. So if you're banning an abortion 6 weeks, most women don't even know that they're pregnant, like at all. So we also have people who are making decisions who know nothing about the populations that they're like really working against. Or maybe they do, and that's the whole point, right? But we also, don't forget, we have like that weird Puritan values history in this country. If we knew history, right, we'd know men in this country have always been very excited to like punish women sexually, even though it's their bad doing. It's like, yes, but like women are like the Scarlets that, Scarlet Letter and what's the other one? Salem Witch Trials.
The Crucible.
The Crucible, right?
That's the name of
I saw Chrissy dancing in the woods, right? All that stuff. Like we love to just like kill women. We've always loved that as a country. Or like to just say that we're hysterical and like put us away someplace.
Do you agree with, do you know Jill Filipovich?
I know that name. I think we follow each other.
She's a really good writer. And a recent newsletter is titled, "They're Coming for All of It. IVF, miscarriage management, contraception, laws requiring doctors provide emergency life-saving care. The anti-abortion movement is on the warpath." Do you agree they're coming for all of it?
Oh, hell yeah. That's what Black women have been telling y'all for freaking decades now, right? It's like, if there's one, there's all, right? So I always say, when we would think about like the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Immigration Act, like they're triumvirate of acts. They are inclusive, all three. You take away one, you're taking away all three. So we've seen chipping away at civil rights, chipping away at voting rights, chipping away at immigration rights. That's been happening. We've been saying that. We've been writing about it. Nobody can hear it. All of a sudden, we're like the most visible, invisible people on the planet. Then with Kavanaugh and all this other stuff, it's like, hey, listen, it's not just about, abortion. It's like they will come for birth control. They will come for marriage equity. They will come from LGBTQ plus politics in general. They will come for your books. They will come for, Black people being in positions of power. They will come from integrated schools. Like, we have been saying this with our little alarms, and everyone's like, do. And then when it's all of a sudden, it's like, hey, all these things are interconnected. It's like, can you believe it? Black women on the sideline. Yeah.
Are we noticing something new now that Black folks, especially women of color, have gotten a lot more into positions of power in Congress and pretty much everywhere, the vice president? I feel like Black women, people of color in general, are a lot more outspoken and feel somehow more emboldened to speak now that there's more folks in power? I feel like that's a newish thing. I feel like every day I'm seeing, a Plaskett or who was it yesterday, the Texas representative, congresswoman who was really outspoken as well. I'm forgetting her name, but I feel like I see it all. Is that it feels like a positive thing.
I don't think it's new.
Well, not new that there's
black female elected officials is the greatest it's been, sure. But like even in the 60s, black women in the civil rights movement, they were the leaders. It's just they weren't the ones who had the power in front of the cameras. Like they were the ones who were writing these strategy memos. They were the ones in the meetings. They were the ones who were, sort of a lot of the intellectual heft behind a lot of these conversations. It's just the gender politics of the 1950s and 60s made it such that, they weren't front and center, but they were absolutely leaders there. That's why so much of the literature now is trying to reverse engineer the narratives that we've been told and talk about the women in SNCC and SCLC and various parts of the civil rights movement. They weren't ordained ministers per se, but like Rosa Parks wasn't just like a little lady at the back of the bus. It's like, you're a rape investigator, you're a writer. Like she was a very intellectually important part of the larger civil rights strategic movement. Septima Clark, Fannie Lou Hamer, like Coretta Scott King behind Martin Luther King. Yet he's like, Coretta, what should we be doing? Right. So this is a much more complicated story that we're now just starting to tell. I think it's visually a lot different because we have black female electeds, but we also have to remember, descriptive doesn't necessarily mean substantive. So just because you have black women in elected office or appointed office, we also have to recognize the constraints that they have because like take someone like Lori Lightfoot, obviously an imperfect messenger, sure. But like her relationship with the media, her relationship with the state house, her relationship with the governor. Most people have never had a black person in charge, let alone a black woman in charge. So like how we have to navigate leadership is very different. It's not a coincidence that we've never had a black female governor in the history of this nation. It's not a coincidence that we've only had 2 black female senators, U.S. senators in the history of this nation. Like these aren't coincidences. So now that we're seeing like, okay, so Chicago has had a black mayor, 1 term, she gets voted out. Karen Bass, new mayor of Los Angeles. Okay, we'll see if she gets a 2nd term, right? Philadelphia looks like they're going to have a black female mayor, right? As of Tuesday's election. So, Mayor-elect Parker. We'll see if she makes it to November. And if she does, whether or not she's a multi-term mayor. So, but, in the state house, like that's a different set of constraints. We have like minority leaders in various state houses across the country and people who are rising stars and it's great, but like they're still working in a patriarchal and racist system. And there's a dichotomous relationship in this country between black and white. And yes, we can talk about Asians and Latinos and Native peoples and everybody in between. There's something that is baked literally into the soil about a relationship between black Americans. And I'm not talking about black immigrants, right? Shirley Chisholm, daughter of black immigrants. Kamala Harris, daughter of black immigrants. Like the book that I'm writing about Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan and Stacey Abrams is very specific because they're black American and we can't seem to figure it out. I don't know what it is. We all know it. It's tangible. It's sort of like there's air that's around us and we can't feel it, but we know that it's there. There's something in this country about being black American that also sort of hits you at the kneecaps when it comes to leadership levels. So we'll see if 2024 changes some things, but thus far, not so much. And Ketanji Brown Jackson, yes, is black American. She's also not elected. She's appointed. And we can talk about husbands.
No, you split a lot of hairs.
About the politics of white husbands at another podcast, but that also is a variable in the conversation.
Oh, wow. Look at where you went there. Okay. You're talking about her being married to a white guy, Ketanji Brown Jackson. I was thinking of, by the way, Jasmine Crockett. That's whose name I was, the Texas representatives. Well, just going back to the issue of women's reproductive rights, and I feel like
sorry, I'm trying to like draw larger pictures.
It's fine. I feel like the issue on the issue of women's reproductive rights and gun violence, something does seem to be changing ever so slowly, or maybe in terms of the outcomes of elections. This week's primary elections, board elections. You saw what happened, of course, in Wisconsin there with that Supreme Court. Just like that was such a huge. It seems like those are these. We're seeing a signal of the direction that we're going in. That the issue of gun violence and kids being murdered in their schools is. I don't know how many it takes. But obviously the issue of women's reproductive rights, now the entire Southeast abortion is limited. What with North Carolina going that direction? Don't you think that's having a negative effect, at least for the conservative movement, for the outcome of elections?
It depends. I mean, it seems like in some places, yeah. I mean, we can keep certain things on the ballot and, it's obviously an important issue to a lot of us. But like, let's be clear. There are so many elected officials who are just like, no, we have to keep our guns. We'll just get kids clear backpacks and like get, into bed with all of these security companies and people that'll scan your kids to go into school. And, we'll make money on the back end investing in, sort of the politics of security, which we've done time and time again with various wars. And like, that's how you're going to see a whole bunch of politicians resigning and then becoming board members of these companies that provide all this metal detectors and things to schools across the country, which I think is just so rich, right? Because it's like, don't tread on me and stay out of my home and freedoms. But it's like, yeah, but let's have our kids go through metal detectors because we don't want to take away AR-15s that can like blast through, a bore in like 1 second, let alone a human being. Listen, this is, we have public conversations, we have private conversations. Black folks had a private conversation after Sandy Hook, and we were like, okay, well, it's a wrap. Like, no one's protected. There were conversations, like articles written, but like every single Black person knew that gun control would never happen after Sandy Hook. Right? It's over because these were middle-class white children. And that is like, if you all don't care about that group, it's like you clearly don't care about inner cities, you clearly don't care about poor people, you clearly don't care about Black people, you clearly don't care about communities of color. But these are your people. These are your little babies. Your little babies. They're babies. Over 24 of them. And nothing happened except for you have some loons that are like, Obama hired child actors, dig up their graves. And it's like, wow, that's your response to your own babies?
Well, nothing happened.
Like you?
I will push back on nothing happened because we don't want to discount the work of activists at the local level, which created a bunch of laws in Connecticut, in New York. You're talking about nothing happening at the national level through the U.S. Congress.
At the Republican Party level, they dug in their heels and said, no, let's actually, and the NRA raised lots of money and bought off lots of politicians, and they dug in their heels. And I think that's a fair pushback, and I appreciate it. But they dug in their heels, and it's like, so if you want to succeed, then you're going to be in lockstep and say guns, 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 more guns, all guns, right? All guns matter. I've seen that t-shirt. So we all knew in the large Black people meeting that we have, that once Sandy Hook happened, there was going to be nothing from the Republican Party that would even remotely look like compromise.
How do you get, do white people ever get to go to the Black people meeting?
No, you all can come to a cookout here and there. And even that's becoming a little too wide for me.
Is that right? How many?
I don't think that there should be spaces for everybody. I mean, listen, I went to all girls school for a certain point in time. I think that there are spaces for women to be together. I think men should be together. I think people, I think that there's a space for HBCUs. I think it's an important space. So, this is why you have, yeshivas, whatever it is. I do think that there are important spaces sometimes for you to have some of these hard conversations because we don't all just, agree on everything and we got to tussle some things out. So for your listeners, no, there isn't a big collective 44 million person Black people Zoom call where we talk about these things. I'm sure someone's gonna be like, what? They're all on a Zoom? No, we're not.
They're all on a Zoom.
It's 44 million people. Who's got the code? What time does it start? But, the proverbial, inviting white people to a cookout, I just think it's we've started inviting way too many people to the cookout. I did like the Dave Chappelle skit, though, with the racial draft, where it's we get to trade people.
Yeah, that was...
Because there are lots of people we want to trade.
What do you, we haven't talked in a while on the record here. I want to get your thoughts on Joe Biden running for re-election. Are you excited?
No, but that's not my, I'm very rarely excited. I mean, does he have the record to run? Yes. Is he a touch long in the tooth for my taste? Sure. Do I think that he should be challenged? No. Am I going to support him so we can continue these wins? Yes. Am I going to support Kamala Harris because I know that the Republican strategy is to scare their voters and weak-leaning independents to say, Joe Biden's old, and by voting for him, you could possibly get like a black female president because he might die in office. We can't have that. And there's some people who can never vote for a woman. There's some people who can never vote for a black person or a South Asian person or a child of immigrants. And that's going to work for a lot of people. So if you look at his record, though, like he's had hits. He's had some undeniable hits. He's been very successful. So if that's what the parameters are, then yeah, I'm in it. Let's do it.
Let's talk about New York City, where you write a column for Amsterdam News, the oldest black newspaper in the country.
One of the oldest, yeah.
And of course, you know everybody. This is the thing people don't know about Chrissy. She knows everybody. She's got a lot of. I'm not done. She's got a lot of famous, very influential friends, and everybody wants a piece of her, wants to talk to her, wants to get her take. And you have some kind of relationship with the mayor of New York. What do you make of what happened last week on the subway 2 weeks ago, where a guy was yelling, a black guy was upset, he was yelling, and a white guy who was a Marine killed him. Everybody knows the story I'm talking about. Do you see any kind of nuance there? Are you pretty confident that he should be charged? What's the larger problem there?
He absolutely has to be charged. We can't have a society where someone is making you feel uncomfortable on the train and you get to strangle them for 15 minutes until you kill them. We also know that there is never a scenario that you can imagine where a white man is acting out on a train and a black man's like, ugh, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And he gets to strangle him for 15 minutes and then go have a quick tete-a-tete with the NYPD for 20 minutes. And then they let this black man go home and sleep soundly in his bed for a few days. What's that scenario? What movie is that? That's the craziest movie you can't even imagine that movie. So Eric Adams, his first response, this is the issue that a lot of us have with Eric Adams. His first response is always the response of like a cop, a Giuliani-esque cop. And
well, he was a former cop. In case people know, his career was in law enforcement.
Yeah, law enforcement. And which also we're not accustomed to black leaders coming from law enforcement as executives. They're usually, lawyers, businessmen. So even there's like a class element. There's like a polish that white voters are sort of accustomed to. He's more of an outer borough straight shooter. He was in the state house for a hot second. Let's be clear, though. I say all that to say, I think that Eric Adams is one of the smartest politicians I've ever come across. Huh. I'm smart enough to recognize when people are smarter than me. I know that he knows this city incredibly well. I think of the 9 million of us. I always tell people, I put myself in the top 1% of people who know New York, past and present, right? I studied this thing. I write about it. I am an astute observer of New York City politics. I put Eric Adams in the top 10 people. 10 of the 9 million of us. That doesn't mean I agree with him on everything, but like this man understands all of the different people who live in New York, not just the black people. And there are lots of different ones of us, right? They're the homeowners in Brooklyn and Queens. There's the sort of the young people. They're the fourth generations. There's the black ethnics. Like he understands us, but he also understands like the white ethnics and the white Upper East Sides and the white Upper West Sides who were different from the Upper East Sides. Like he gets Chinatown, like you name it, this man gets it. So I say all that to say his first response was obviously underwhelming for a lot of progressive New Yorkers of all stripes. And then he sort of walks it back. And so then it's just like, well, we got to sort of wait and see, and it seems very sympathetic. Now, that is the role of a mayor, so he doesn't incite a riot because we saw that there were lots of protests and people are obviously upset. But you can't then have sympathy, say like, we really got to figure something out. It's like, well, sir, last I checked, you're in charge of the budget and you want to keep detracting from the mental health budget and putting it all in the police budget, Mr. Former Policeman. So we know I've looked at the data. Every single city says the same thing. You're not going to police your way out of any scenario. You're just not. And so the way he campaigned, it actually made sense. He was like, listen, it's like a Desmond Tutu quote that he would always use. People are always drowning in the water. They're coming down like this waterfall and they keep drowning and we keep pulling them out and it's frantic. And like, instead of doing that, we need to go to the top of the mountain and figure out what it is that's happening so we can get them before they fall in the water. Totally makes sense. So in doing so, in a policy realm, that would mean making sure we give people mental health services, making sure that we actually have a housing plan, making sure that we actually have educational systems, making sure we don't defund our libraries so people have a place to go, not just to read and to use the internet, to have AC in the summer and heat in the winter, but a place of stability, right? I mean, like, if you look at the Brooklyn Public Library, it's like when public institutions were crown jewels of communities, right? I mean, the architecture of the library shows that this is supposed to be a beacon where people of all stripes can come and actually gain knowledge. You can't defund all of these institutions and give that money to police and then say, see, this happened, so we need more police. We don't need more police, actually. We need more police like a hole in the head. We need actually money to go through all these services. But when these things happen, he's sort of like, see, doesn't that prove my point? And I'm like, no, it proves my point. So then we have a little bit of an impasse because some New Yorkers are like, I'm with you, Eric Adams. I don't want to be on the subway. I want to see a cop on every single car. Because listen, there were cops on the train. Clearly, they didn't take a stroll. They were on their phones, which we see all the time. Not all cops, but a lot of cops are on their cell phones a lot of the time. I think it'll be interesting to see if we ever have a no cell phone policy for the NYPD, which we'll never have. But there's a high propensity of people who take pictures of police officers on their phones whilst on duty. So we had cops on the train. They weren't able to do something. 15 minutes. There are no stops that go in between stations for 15 minutes. So I'm assuming doors are opening and closing. Like, what is happening? Where were the police then? Where were they on the platform? Where were they on the train? So like, clearly police can't be everywhere unless we're going to have 9 million police officers for the 9 million citizens. So if that's not possible, then why don't we put money and investment in other areas to make sure this guy had a long history? Yes, which Daniel Penny didn't know, by the way, but he did have a long history of mental health challenges and he did need a lot of help. And we failed him as a city because he didn't get the help that he needed. He didn't get the housing or the education or the mental health services. So this is the tension that we have with the mayor because his natural knee-jerk inclination is to just say, let's throw more police at it.
Right.
And there's so many instances where it's like, that's not what we want to do.
Right.
When someone's in a mental health crisis, the last thing they want to do is see people with like black leather gloves on, a gun, a taser, and an aggressive attitude saying, come here.
The aggressive attitude being key because that's not the solution to.
And who's also not trained. Right. I mean, like, and this is, and I'm not blaming the NYPD, but like their whatever hour or two of training or whatever minimal training they have, they're not clinical therapists. Right. So whatever workshop they had to go through to get their, check it off. It's like, yeah, I did the training. It's like there's training and then there's training.
They don't recognize. I mean, I've heard so many heart-wrenching stories. We've all seen them about, law enforcement's interaction with people who are on the autism spectrum or even older people who have Alzheimer's, and they're looking in somebody's car and somebody calls and says, oh, this suspicious person. And meanwhile, they're completely innocent. And then some cop comes and sprays them in the face. And, that's a measure of training. And it's something that if you wanted to, you could resource it. And that's, I think, what you're talking about where we put our resources to strike at the root of the problem as opposed to somehow appease people, politically. Oh, send police to solve the problem when what you need is social workers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we don't have that. And we don't have that investment. And, it's really hard to be poor in this country. It's expensive to be poor in this country, but it's really hard to be poor.
Yeah, nothing's harder.
And circling back to like your original statement about empathy, I just don't know if we have enough people and enough leaders who understand. Sorry, I live in New York. You can hear ambulances going by. I don't know if we have enough people and leaders with that level of empathy. That being said, I would never want to be mayor. Like, everything's on fire all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I let you go, we have a shared love and need of nature. You've been traveling around. What have you got? What do you want to share in terms of what you've seen, experienced, witnessed recently? It's spring. That matters, right?
Spring is springing. It's so great, isn't it? So let's see. I've been going birding with a colleague of mine this semester, which has been lovely. And I keep a pair of binoculars in my office. So I now have office binoculars and home binoculars. I went to a quick trip to Puerto Rico with my best friend from 9th grade just to catch up and, reconnect. I'm her son's godmother. And so, we just needed some like one-on-one time. And I told MSNBC, I really like Jonathan Lemire, who has his way too early show. Yep. I've known Jonathan since he was like a local New York reporter, and he was with AP.
He's smart. I like him. Yeah, go ahead.
He's smart and he's nice, and I like doing his show because it's so early, I can go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Whereas like Morning Joe, it's like, well, now I'm up. It's 7:30, so it's like, you feel like you kind of have to just like stay up. So like Jonathan's show is actually so early. It's like, oh, this is great. Like, I don't mind doing it because I can get right on back of the bed. So I decided to do his show, because I like him and his producers. But because of that, and I was in Puerto Rico really quickly, I ended at like 5:50 and the sun was coming up. And so I like left my room and I like walked along the beach, and I could see one person like in the distance, but I made all these recordings of like birds. I saw the sun and I saw the clouds moving. When you're in Caribbean area, I mean, the clouds are just their own show. So I've just been trying to like slow it down a bit. The great thing about summer is I don't teach during the summer. There are a lot of professors who do, a lot of teachers who do as well for various reasons, but I don't teach during the summer. So it's just a nice like gear shift where I can do some things. So now I got to just get into the writing mindset pretty soon and do that.
Well, I am glad to hear all of it, and I am so grateful that you joined me today. I always learned so much hearing your thoughts and perspective on all of these things. Thank you.
I love talking to you.
And I hope we can talk again soon here.
Yeah, it's been fun.
All right, there she goes. Dr. Christina Greer, Dr_CM Greer on Twitter. Go listen to the Blackest Questions on the Greer Podcast Network and FAQ NYC as well. Tell her you heard her here on the show. And join me tonight at the Hangout. It's Thursday night. I hope to see you there. Maybe John Carroll, who's singing to us, will be there. And it's always a great time, no matter who joins us. I hope tonight it's you. Go to standupwithpete.com right now and sign up for a subscription so we can keep this baby going. Today's quote of the day comes from Buddhist priest Pema Chodron, who has written several books, one of which is basically always on me. I carry it everywhere. I read it all the time. It's called Taking the Leap. And go get that book. It's been a game changer for my life. Pema Chodron says, we think that the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together, they fall apart. Then they come together again and fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, room for relief, for misery, and of course, room for joy. Pema Chodron, I hope you find the room for joy especially today, and I hope to see you tonight. Bye-bye. Thanks, Pema Chodron.
Stand our ground and then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cause the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.